There was almost immediate interest in adapting Childhood's End as a film. Clark wrote, in an introduction to a reprint of the book, published appropriately enough in the year 2001, that it eventually passed through innumerable hands and was translated into countless screenplays. One of these, which Clark himself claims to have collaborated on at an unspecified time, was by screenwriter Howard Koch, the man who had previously adapted War of the Worlds into the infamous 1938 radio drama performed by Orson Welles. For a brief period, even Stanley Kubrick was interested. When Kubrick originally met with Clark around 1964 to talk about the collaboration that would eventually become 2001, Kubrick first suggested they work on a film version of Childhood's End. That plan was abandoned after they discovered someone else already owned the rights. 2001's plot eventually found its basis in Clark's earlier 1951 short story, The Sentinel, and the person who inadvertently stopped Kubrick from making Childhood's End? That would be writer-director Abraham Polanski, an overlooked and thoroughly fascinating figure in his own right. Polanski had made his directorial debut in 1948 with the very underappreciated film noir Force of Evil, before being blacklisted from Hollywood during the Communist Scare. After spending about 20 years rewriting and selling screenplays anonymously, he was finally afforded the opportunity to return to directing in 1969, with the politically charged western Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here. As he prepared to release his next film, the 1971 adventure Romance of a Horse Thief, it was reported that Polanski had 3 new productions in the works: an adaptation of Thomas Mann's Mario and the Magician, a version of the Ramayana, and Childhood's End. According to an article on Mental Floss, Polanski actually managed to complete a screenplay for Childhood's End, apparently co-written with Howard Koch, the same man Clark supposedly worked with at some point, either on a different screenplay or maybe the same one. It's unclear. But then a history like this wouldn't be complete without a few discrepancies. None of Polanski's planned projects were ever able to move forward, and Romance of a Horse Thief wound up being his final directorial effort. By 1975, Childhood's End had passed into the hands of a studio, Universal Pictures. Writer-producer Gene Kearney, who'd worked on shows like Kojak and Night Gallery, took charge of development and began pushing it as a feature film. Kearney left Universal in 1977, leaving the project with writer Philip Daguerre. Like Kearney, most of Daguerre's experience was in television. His credits include Alias Smith and Jones, Simon and Simon, the 80s reboot of The Twilight Zone, and a 1978 TV movie based on Marvel's Doctor Strange, which he wrote and directed. Under Daguerre's guidance, Childhood's End finally started making some real progress, shifting from a feature film to a 6-hour miniseries for CBS television, then finally to a 2 or 3 hour telemovie for ABC. The production hit a snag in 1978 when Universal discovered some of their contracts with author Arthur C. Clarke were out of date. While lawyers spent around 9 months renegotiating, Daguerre wrote a 70-page treatment outlining his plan for the adaptation, which introduced some major structural changes to the story. Clarke's novel had divided the narrative into 3 parts. Part 1 centered on the character of Stormgren, a middle-aged diplomat and the only human permitted to meet and interact with the Overlord Supervisor of Earth, Corellin, though Corellin keeps his appearance carefully hidden. Part 2 took place around 50 years later. Stormgren has died, and the Overlords have revealed their physical form, which turns out to be forebodingly demon-like. Several important new characters are introduced, but the most significant turns out to be Rodericks, a young astrophysicist who comes to believe that he has discovered the location of the Overlord's home planet. After hatching a plan to stow away on one of the alien ships, which leads to his discovery of their true purpose, Rodericks returns in Part 3, 80 years Earth time later, and finds he is the only true human being left in the universe. Daguerre felt the story needed a stronger connecting link between these different sections. He decided to make Rodericks the story's lead character, introducing him earlier in Part 1 and making his arc the emotional through line. By early 1979, the contractual issues had been settled, and Daguerre began turning his treatment into a full screenplay. To develop the visual side, he hired conceptual artist Neil Adams, who would also work on an unmade adaptation of Alfred Bester's The Star's My Destination in the 90s. Conscious of contributing images that would help to tell the story, Adams created extensive artwork visualizing the Overlord's ships. The interiors had an open, three-dimensional layout, absent of stairs or lifts, the idea being they were made to accommodate beings with the ability to fly. For the ship's external appearance over the Earth's cities, Adams realized they should be partially obscured by clouds, in order to convey their mind-boggling size. He even designed and built an effect for realizing the Overlords themselves, a telescoping system that would have allowed an actor to be fitted with realistic folding wings. Daguerre contacted Arthur C. Clarke and received his approval for the adaptation, but the production was unable to approve its budget with Universal. Their telemovie had been budgeted at $10 million, and Daguerre estimated they would probably need closer to $40 million to make it happen. The project languished. In 1981, Daguerre said that although the studio was showing interest, the story was still too odd and the price tag too high for a full commitment. As time passed, inevitably, certain ideas and images started popping up elsewhere that seemed to owe some of their origin to Childhood's End. Adams claims his original designs were quite similar to the effects work done for the 1983 miniseries V, and even Arthur C. Clarke couldn't help commenting on some similarities found in Independence Day. Before all the explosions start, Roland Emmerich's 1996 blockbuster actually featured some breathtaking opening scenes that weren't too far off in tone from Clarke's book. In 2002, Universal finally revived Childhood's End as a film project, with Boys Don't Cry director Kimberly Peirce attached. Peirce was a surprising choice, a visceral boundary pusher with an impressive knack for hard-hitting drama. She didn't seem an immediate fit for a science fiction story, but given the unusual qualities of Clarke's book, Peirce could have proven unusually apt for the task. Little developed after the announcement, but Peirce was still talking about her plans for the adaptation after completing her second film, Stop Loss, in 2008. The same year, author Arthur C. Clarke passed away. Then, around 2013, something changed. Television was rapidly expanding as a medium, making Childhood's End suddenly seem less out of reach. Universal passed the property over to the Syfy channel, who hired producer Michael DeLuca, who hired writer Matthew Graham, and together, they made it happen. With relative ease and speed. Childhood's End was released as a completed miniseries in 2015, the end result of over 60 years of development, delays, and false starts. It's an achievement to respect, but it doesn't quite realize the potential that had been lying dormant for so long within the book.